They told me my daughter couldn't fly first class because she looked homeless. That's what the attendant said right there in front of everyone, loud and sharp, like it was a warning for others to keep an eye on us. The words hit like a slap. People behind us in line stopped talking. I saw a few heads turn. My daughter Ellie stood beside me, holding her backpack strapped so tightly her knuckles went white. Her face crumpled before I could say anything, and she blinked fast like she could push the tears back in time. But I saw one roll down her cheek and drop onto her sneakers, landing like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I opened my mouth to respond, to defend her, to defend us, but the gate agent, a young guy with slicked hair and a name tag that read K. Donovan, held up a hand like I was interrupting a lecture. "Ma'am," he said sharply, "please step aside." Before I could ask what he meant, he flagged a nearby security guard with a quick wave like this was routine, like we were just the next problem on his list. My heart was hammering, my skin flushed with heat and disbelief. I felt a mix of humiliation and rage building in my throat like a scream I couldn't let out. I looked at Ellie, her head down, shoulders curled in like she wanted to vanish. And just as the security guard started walking toward us, a man appeared, clean-cut, mid-40s, wearing a sharp navy suit and carrying an aura of quiet authority. He walked right up to the agent, didn't hesitate for a second, pulled out a sleek silver card and said 5 words that seemed to cut through the noise of the entire terminal like a blade. "She's with me." Everything stopped. Conversations dropped. The hum of the airport seemed to fade. Even the security guard froze mid-step. The agent stepped back like he'd seen a ghost. Those words, just 5 simple ones, shifted the energy of the entire space. In that instant, everything changed. Sometimes all it takes is one voice, steady, kind, and loud enough to matter, to change the direction of someone's story. And if moments like this resonate with you, if you believe in the quiet power of standing up, of showing up, of being seen, I invite you to stay with me. Like this story, share it if it moved you, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Because stories like these deserve to be heard. My name is Megan Carter, and if there's one principle I've held on to through every storm life has hurled at me, it's this: I keep my promises, especially the ones I whisper late at night to the daughter who made me braver than I ever meant to be. Ellie turned 15 last month. 15 going on 40, with an old soul tucked inside that ever-questioning heart. She's my only child, my constant heartbeat in a world that too often forgets to be kind. But this past year, life had not just tapped her on the shoulder, it had knocked her down with both fists. She started high school last fall, and something inside her dimmed. Once upon a time, she was this radiant burst of energy, loud, expressive painting outside the lines with a laugh that could fill a room. She used to sing while she drew talk to strangers in the grocery line, dance through the living room with her mismatched socks and hair full of pencils. But high school, with its ruthless efficiency, has a way of boxing kids into neat categories and crushing the parts that don't fit. And Ellie, in all her patch-covered thrift store glory, refused to be edited. She wore vintage band tees, sweaters 3 sizes too big, combat boots with the soles coming loose at the toes, and cargo pants that hung low on her hips like a quiet rebellion. She didn't dress to impress, she dressed to express. But kids can be cruel architects of silence. They gave her names like weird homeless and trash can chic, and worse, the teachers let those words float unchallenged. Friends drifted away like leaves caught in wind, and Ellie began to retreat, hood pulled low, laughter, buried eyes avoiding the mirror as if her reflection carried shame instead of spirit. So when I managed to scrape together enough for a small escape, just the 2 of us, mother and daughter, against the world, I knew it had to be more than a trip. It had to be a declaration, an antidote. I wanted her to remember that joy was still hers to claim. I didn't tell her until the morning we left. She walked into the kitchen to find 2 bags sitting by the door, neatly packed and zipped. When I told her we were heading to New York for the weekend, just us, her eyes went wide, glossy with disbelief. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "Really just us," like she needed to make sure it wasn't a dream. We arrived at the airport early, riding the quiet buzz of anticipation. Ellie was nervous, fidgeting with the hem of her hoodie, but trying so hard to play it cool. She had chosen her outfit with care, her beloved denim jacket with hand-stitched patches, a thick gray hoodie beneath it, olive cargo pants, and her usual scuffed boots. Her hair was knotted into a messy bun, a pencil tucked through it like always when she was in a creative mood. She looked like herself, utterly beautifully, uniquely Ellie. As we waited in line to check our bags, a woman nearby gave us a glance, the kind that slices without a word, then turned to her husband and whispered something behind a perfectly manicured hand. I saw it. I heard the judgment in the rustle of breath and pretended I didn't. Let them think what they want. This moment wasn't theirs. At the gate, I handed our tickets to Ellie and told her to read the seat numbers aloud. When she saw 1A and 1B, her eyes widened like someone had just opened the sky. "Wait," she breathed. "First class. You got us first class." I smiled and nodded. "Happy birthday, baby." She laughed bright and unfiltered for the first time in months and said I feel like royalty. And in that flickering moment, she truly did. But joy like paper is fragile. As we stepped into the first-class boarding lane, a young man in a crisp airline uniform stepped into our path. His smile was taut, perfunctory, and his eyes dulled by routine. He looked at Ellie first, then me, and then back at her again, with just enough scrutiny to raise the hairs on my neck. "Excuse me," he said, voice polite but rigid. "This lane is for first-class passengers only." I smiled, still riding the high of the surprise. "We are first class," I said, and handed him our boarding passes. He scanned them, and for a brief second, I thought that would be the end of it. But then I saw his gaze settle on Ellie again. His expression stiffened. "Ma'am," he said slowly, each word picked with discomfort, "your daughter's attire. It doesn't meet our premium cabin standards." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" He leaned in slightly, dropping his voice just enough to make it worse. "She doesn't appear to be dressed appropriately. We have expectations in first class and well..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. His tone spoke the rest. I looked at Ellie. Her whole body had gone still. The grin was gone, erased like chalk under rain. Her hands clutched the backpack tighter, her eyes locked on the floor. A lump swelled in my throat, fierce and bitter. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, voice rising. The attendant exhaled already, scanning for backup. A security guard stood nearby, and with a flick of his fingers, the attendant summoned him like we were causing a scene. All of the joy, the magic, the triumph of that moment was undone in seconds, soured by a stranger with a badge and a bias. Ellie didn't say a word, but I saw her brimming with unshed tears. The same girl who had spent an entire year folding herself smaller to escape cruel eyes now stood frozen, targeted, betrayed by a system that should have welcomed her. I wanted to scream, to rage, to tear the policy into ribbons and scream that she belonged. Instead, I held her hand. I couldn't move. I didn't trust my voice. My mind looped through disbelief, tickets confirmed, bags checked, arrival on time. So what was this? Why did this man think we had no right to be there? "Ma'am," he repeated, gesturing again. "If you'll step aside, we can clear this up." His tone was syrupy, condescending, rehearsed. I could tell he'd done this before. I was meant to nod, to apologize, to slink away with my daughter in tow. But I didn't move. I looked at Ellie, shoulders hunched, face streaked with silent shame. And it wasn't the outfit that made her look small. It was the judgment, the erasure, the unspoken accusation that she wasn't good enough. I straightened, my voice trembling but firm. "This is my daughter. She is flying first class. We both are. Check your screen again." He sighed, tapping his tablet with the performative disinterest of someone who had already made his decision. "I'm not saying she can't fly," he murmured. "I'm saying she's not dressed for the premium cabin. There are standards. She's clean, she's dressed modestly, she's comfortable. What exactly is the issue?" He hesitated, and that pause told me everything. He had no answer, only a prejudice he didn't expect to be challenged. Ellie tugged at my sleeve, her voice like cracked porcelain. "Mom, it's okay. Can we just go? I don't want to be here anymore." I turned to her. Her eyes, red glassy, met mine. And what I saw wasn't defiance. It was resignation. Not the fiery anger of injustice, but the exhausted weight of someone used to being dismissed. It broke me. "No," I said, louder. "It's not okay." Around us, heads turned. A couple nearby stopped mid-conversation, brows lifting. A man behind them leaned closer. Phones came out. I felt the heat of attention sharpen on us. The gate agent looked behind him and signaled again to security. The guard started toward us. And still I didn't move. Not because I wanted to make a scene, but because I couldn't bear to let her shrink any further. She deserved that seat. She deserved to be seen. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. Behind us, an older man tilted his head with quiet curiosity, his reading glasses pushed up into his graying hair as he leaned forward listening. Further back, someone raised their phone screen, angled just enough to suggest a recording had begun. I knew how this scene was shaping in their minds, a frantic woman, a tearful teenager staff trying to calm things down. The kind of airport drama that made for viral content and whispered judgment. But this wasn't drama. This was humiliation meticulously wrapped in protocol. The gate agent, clearly aware of the eyes gathering like a storm around us, flicked a glance toward the security desk and raised a hand in a stiff gesture. A uniformed guard began moving toward us with methodical steps, like a machine springing to life. I moved instinctively, stepping in front of Ellie with my back straight and my voice steady, though everything inside me was trembling. "This is harassment." I said the words, slicing through the tension like a blade. "My daughter hasn't broken a single rule. She is being singled out because of her clothes, because she doesn't look rich. But that's not your call." The attendant remained rooted in place, his face blank, shoulders drawn taut. He didn't deny it. He didn't look at me. He just stared beyond us toward the incoming guard like a child waiting for an adult to fix the mess they helped create. Ellie tugged my sleeve again. Her voice cracked, barely audible. "Mom, please. Stop. Everyone's watching. I just want to go home." Her eyes, wide, glassy, desperate, cut through my defenses like nothing else could. She looked so small, so done. Her cheeks were flushed with the heat of public shame, and when I knelt in front of her and cupped her trembling hands in mine, I realized she was holding back tears with everything she had left. "Look at me," I said softly. "You didn't do anything wrong. Do you hear me? You belong here, right here." She looked away, her face flushed shame curling her shoulders inward. And then the security guard reached us. His voice was monotone, heavy with routine. "Is there a problem here?" Before I could answer, the gate agent stepped forward with performative urgency. "Yes, I've asked these passengers to move aside. We're sorting out a ticket issue." "No," I said, rising to my feet with a sharpness that surprised even me. "There's no issue. We have first-class tickets. He just doesn't like the way my daughter looks." The guard, now standing beside us, turned slowly to the agent and studied the boarding passes in his hand. "She has a valid seat," he asked, his voice neutral but edged with suspicion. The attendant hesitated. That pause, the beat of it, was louder than anything he could have said. "Yes," he mumbled, but what I demanded, my voice rising despite myself. Behind me, Ellie covered her face with both hands. Her body began to tremble. I watched her shoulders quake as sobs finally broke through the surface of her silence. The guard sighed heavy and resigned. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me. Let's step aside and talk." I froze. For a heartbeat, maybe two, I couldn't move. Because I knew that stepping aside now would mean surrender. It would mean conceding that this stranger had the power to decide where we did or didn't belong. Around us, faces stared in silence. No one spoke. No one helped. We were alone in the middle of a watching crowd. And then I heard it, a voice behind us, calm, measured, assured. "She's with me." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The tone carried weight. Everything paused again. The guard turned. The gate agent's mouth parted slightly in disbelief. I spun toward the sound and saw him, a tall man in a sharply tailored navy suit, silver tie knotted with precision shoes polished to a matte gleam. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who had long since stopped needing to prove himself. Clipped to his jacket pocket was a badge, sleek metallic, and in his hand a silver card that gleamed like authority itself. He stepped forward, holding the card out like a passport to a better world. "She's with me," he repeated more softly now, his eyes on the attendant. Everything in the room shifted. The security guard instinctively stepped back. The gate agent, suddenly paling, fumbled to find his voice. "Oh, of course, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize—" The man didn't look at him. Not once. His focus was entirely on Ellie and me. He crouched slightly so he could meet Ellie's eyes, still red, still shimmering with fresh grief, and said in a voice so gentle it made my own eyes sting, "Hey, that shouldn't have happened to you. Come on, let's get you to your seat." Ellie looked up at him, blinking through the blur. She couldn't find the words, but her silence was full of stunned gratitude. The man stood turned to the agent and said with quiet steel, "Process their boarding. Now. And make a note of this, there is no dress code in this airline's premium cabins that overrides basic human respect." The attendant swallowed hard, his complexion gray. "Yes, sir," he murmured, motioning hastily for us to proceed. The crowd, once so eager to consume our shame, now watched in reverent silence as we walked toward the jet bridge. My hand found Ellie's, and she gripped it tightly. Her fingers were trembling. I glanced at her and saw the flicker of confusion in her expression, the stunned, lingering question. Why did this man help us? And the truth was I didn't know either. We boarded through the first-class entrance, the kind where the air seems a little cooler, the lights a little softer, and the tone a little more hushed, where the quiet wealth of status whispers through every detail. The flight attendant at the door caught sight of the man who had intervened and offered him a knowing nod, subtle but unmistakably respectful. Then she turned to us with a warmth so polished it almost felt rehearsed, ushering us into our seats as if we were long-expected guests of honor. Row 1. The front of the plane. The kind of seats that cradle you, like a promise, broad plush, trimmed in leather with space to breathe and sigh and stretch. A glass of champagne was offered, along with hot towels neatly folded like origami. Ellie sank into her seat, her small frame almost lost in the embrace of it, while I sat beside her, still trying to adjust to the strangeness of being seen and welcomed. The man stood nearby, hands casually tucked into his pockets, his posture composed yet attentive, as if he was still quietly making sure we were all right. I finally found my voice. "Thank you," I said, almost a whisper. "I don't even know your name." He smiled, a soft crinkle forming at the corners of his eyes. "Jackson Reed." My breath caught. The name shimmered with familiarity. "You work for the airline?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I do," he replied with a gentle nod. "Executive Vice President. I oversee passenger experience, among other things." My stomach fluttered. This wasn't just a generous bystander with travel perks. This was a man who could write policy with a pen stroke. The kind of person who didn't follow rules, he set them. "I don't understand," I said quietly, the honesty raw in my throat. "Why did you help us? You didn't know who we were." He turned his gaze toward Ellie, who sat curled into her seat, like she wanted to disappear into the upholstery. Her eyes, though dry now, were distant, guarded. "Because I used to be her," he said simply, "not in every way, but close enough." He sat on the armrest across from us, his voice steady, his presence oddly comforting. "When I was a teenager, I looked different too. Wore hand-me-downs, never the right kind of shoes. I worked part-time just to afford textbooks. And more than once someone looked at me and saw only what they expected to see less." I said nothing. Neither did Ellie. We were both listening in the way you do when someone's truth aligns too closely with your own. "One day," he continued, "I was in court over a parking ticket I couldn't afford to pay. Just another kid without the right clothes or the right name. I thought I was invisible. But this woman, this stranger, stood up and spoke for me. Said I was more than what they saw. Said I deserved a shot. I never forgot that." His eyes flicked toward the front of the plane, where the gate agent from earlier now fussed nervously with the overhead compartments, avoiding eye contact, like the air itself might call him out. "I made a promise," Jackson said, his voice low but firm. "If I ever had the chance to be that person for someone else, I'd take it." For the first time since we sat down, Ellie spoke. Her voice was so soft it barely rose above the quiet hum of the engines. "Thank you." Jackson turned and smiled at her, genuine, unpatronizing. "You didn't need me to be here to belong," he said, "but I'm glad I was." He checked his watch, gave us a nod, and stepped into the galley to confer with the flight crew. Ellie shifted beside me, leaning her head lightly against my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her and exhaled long and slow, feeling a tension release that I hadn't even realized I'd been holding since we walked through the terminal doors. She whispered, "I didn't do anything wrong." "Did I?" "No, baby," I said, brushing her hair back gently. "You didn't." And for the first time in hours, she believed me. The plane lifted into the sky with the silent elegance of a story rewriting itself. Ellie sat by the window, her knees drawn up, cheek resting against the glass. Outside, the clouds stretched like frozen waves, white and wide and endless. I didn't speak. I let her exist in that quiet. Let her breathe. A flight attendant passed by and offered a warm cookie and a glass of sparkling water. Ellie accepted with a small nod and the hint of a smile, fragile, hesitant, but real. The cabin air felt different now, like it had softened around us. The shame she carried was still there, hovering. but it was no longer the only thing in the room. Across the aisle, Jackson had returned to his seat. He looked over at Ellie and gave her a subtle thumbs up. She paused for a second, then gave the tiniest nod in return. I leaned closer. You know who he is, right? She shrugged. Sort of. You said he works for the airline. He runs the airline, I whispered. People don't tell him no. They answer to him. She blinked. Then, why would someone like that care about me? I reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Because he saw you. He really saw you. And he remembered what it feels like not to be seen at all. Ellie looked down at her lap, running her fingers along one of the patches she'd sewn into her jacket, delicate stitches forming a jagged heart with wings. I didn't think anyone saw me like that, she murmured. Before I could answer, Jackson stood again and crossed the aisle. Mind if I join you for a moment, he asked. I nodded, and Ellie pulled her legs down, sitting upright with a mix of caution and curiosity. Jackson sat leaning slightly toward her. I didn't mean to embarrass you earlier, he said, tone kind and careful. I know being the center of attention like that can feel like a spotlight you didn't ask for. Ellie gave a slow nod. I'm not used to people standing up for me. Well, Jackson replied, let me be the first of many. He smiled gently. What's your name? Ellie, she said. Beautiful name, he said. I meant what I said out there. You walked into that gate like you belonged because you did. And when someone tried to make you feel small, you stood your ground. That kind of quiet strength. It's rare. She didn't say anything, but I could see his words land. Her hands stopped fidgeting. Her breathing steadied. I don't want to overstep, he said, now looking at me. But I'd like to do something for Ellie, if that's all right with you. I hesitated. You already did more than I could have imagined. He shook his head. I want to go further. Our airline sponsors a youth mentorship initiative, creative fields, entrepreneurship, social advocacy. We pair teens with mentors who can help them grow ideas into action. We offer support, exposure, and sometimes even funding for projects that matter. Ellie's eyes lifted. Like art? Exactly like art, Jackson said. Your jacket, those patches, you made them yourself. She nodded. I draw a lot. I turn the designs into patches and prints. Stickers sometimes. I don't really show them to people, though. You should, he said. The world needs people who make things that don't look like everything else. Ellie glanced at me. I smiled and nodded. You should do it, baby. Jackson reached into his suit jacket and withdrew a sleek black business card, holding it out carefully. No pressure, he said. Reach out when you're ready. No deadlines. Just an open door. Ellie accepted the card like it was something sacred, something rare. Thank you, she whispered. You don't owe me anything, Jackson said, rising. Just promise me this when someone tries to shrink you again. Don't let them. You've got more power than you think. Then with a quiet smile, he returned to his seat as the cabin crew began their final checks for landing. Ellie sat motionless for several long minutes after the plane leveled into its final descent, the weight of the sleek black card resting like a secret in her lap. She studied it in silence, her fingers tracing the lettering with a reverence I hadn't seen her give to anything in months. Then with quiet care, she slid it into the worn pocket of her sketchbook, the one she carried everywhere, its edges softened by time and ink and dreams she hadn't yet dared to share. When we landed, the man who had nearly undone her spirit stood waiting at the aircraft door. The same gate attendant, now stripped of his arrogance, lingered like a ghost in a pressed shirt, avoiding our eyes, shrinking into the background he had once commanded. Jackson didn't address him. He didn't need to. Whatever could have been said had already been said with presence, not words. As we stepped onto solid ground again, Ellie turned to me, her voice quiet, but laced with something new conviction. I think I want to show people my art, not just keep it hidden. I smiled, my chest tightening with that aching mixture of pride and love only a mother understands. Then that's exactly what you'll do. It was in that moment so small, it might have gone unnoticed to anyone else, that I knew something fundamental had shifted inside her. She hadn't just endured that day. She had taken it, molded it into meaning, and claimed it as her own. We walked past the staff, past the gate, and the baggage claim with our heads high and our dignity intact. We didn't look back. There was nothing left to prove. We had our seats. But more than that, we had something no boarding pass could buy, a memory neither of us would ever forget, etched in both pain and grace. That night, after we checked into our hotel, a modest room on the 11th floor overlooking a sliver of the skyline, Ellie curled up by the window. The city sparkled, just beyond the glass lights flickering like tiny fires in the dark. She opened her sketchbook with slow, deliberate hands and turned to a blank page. For a while, she just stared, pencil poised, her eyes distant but focused. Then she looked up. Do you think people will ever stop judging others like that? I sat across from her, perched on the edge of the bed, absorbing the question not just as her mother, but as someone still wrestling with it myself. Not all at once, I said, but I think some people are trying. And what Jackson did today, that helps. What you're doing right now, that helps too. She glanced down again, her pencil moving slowly, now lines taking shape. A small smile pulled at the corner of her mouth. I think I want to design something from this, she murmured. Not just about what happened at the airport, but about what it means to be seen, to be taken seriously without changing who you are. And just like that, I could hear the certainty threading itself back into her voice, no longer just an idea, but a decision. The seed of something powerful. When we returned home days later, Ellie asked me to help scan her sketches into the computer. She wanted to digitize them, turn them into patches, prints, something tangible. I watched her for hours at the kitchen table, completely immersed, her mind alight with creation. It was as if the moment she was given permission, her creativity surged forward, like a tide long held back. She uploaded a few of her designs online, unsure what would come of it. But then, little by little, something began to bloom. A local art collective reached out. Then a youth gallery. A community blog wrote a feature on her work and the story behind it. She called the collection Belonging, her tagline sewn in delicate type beneath each design. You don't have to match the room to deserve your seat in it. Then one afternoon a package arrived. Thick cream-colored envelope stamped with the airline's seal. Inside was a letter printed on rich stationery. It was from Jackson. Ellie, it began. Thank you for reminding me why I do what I do. Your courage and voice are more powerful than you know. With your permission, I shared your story internally. We've started reviewing how we train staff, how we teach them to recognize unconscious bias. Change doesn't come quickly, but it begins with stories like yours. Stay bold. Beneath the letter was a photo framed in smooth black wood. It was us sitting side by side in those first-class seats. Ellie's sketchbook rested in her lap, the sunlight catching the edge of her hair. On the back, in neat cursive, Jackson had written, "Some flights change more than your location." That photo sits on Ellie's desk now, just beside her art supplies, and the small notebook where she scribbles new design ideas. She still wears that jacket she loves, patched, frayed, full of color. Still dresses with defiance and purpose. But now she walks taller, speaks louder, and she no longer shrinks herself to fit into spaces that were never meant to contain her in the first place. And I've changed too. I used to think my role as a mother was to shield her, to protect her from the world's sharp edges. But I've learned it's more than that. It's about standing beside her when those edges come, and making sure she never forgets her worth, even when others try to rewrite it. What happened that day could have shattered her, but instead she forged it into something lasting. Not because of the airline, or even because of Jackson, though he played a part, but because she chose to transform humiliation into expression and silence into strength. That day I learned that sometimes a single voice, clear, brave, and certain, can change everything. Jackson didn't have to stop. He could have walked past like so many others. But he didn't. And because he chose to act, my daughter witnessed what it means to use power for good. So if there's one truth I want to leave with you, it's this: never underestimate what standing up can mean. When someone is diminished, speak. When someone is dismissed, intervene. You don't need a title or a platform. Sometimes all it takes is 5 words: she's with me. Ellie's story isn't over. It's only just begun. But I know this much: she'll never forget the day someone saw her not as a problem to be fixed, but a person to be protected. And neither will I. If this story found its way into your heart, if it made you pause, reflect, or see someone differently, do something with that feeling. Speak up when it matters. Choose empathy, especially when it's inconvenient. And if you've ever been judged for how you look, how you speak, or for simply existing outside the lines, know this: you are enough. You belong. If Ellie's story touched you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below. Your words matter more than you realize. And if you want to hear more stories like this, raw, human, and true, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the world needs more of this. Thank you for watching.